Macron's the president of France attacks on Israel have been pretty apparent for a while, but something has not necessarily changed, but something new came to light. It looks like one of the Israeli airlines that operates inside of France, the security guards for that airline have been not I, technically not getting their visa cancelled, but haven't been getting their visas renewed. This has been happening for the past few months, where Israeli citizens in France have been pretty much getting terminated, sort of like all of them, not just sort of some of them or something like that, but basically nobody is getting anything done, and that seems to speak of the French anti-Israel policy going to everything, going even to citizens of Israel, which again, this is how it starts. Welcome, and also we'll discuss I guess, Macron's open hatred of Israel when it comes to his policy to Gaza, or his comments and actions when it comes to the so-called Palestinian state. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is James Valiant. And James, yeah, what do you make? It looks like I'm just trying to, the security guards for the El Al airlines are, yeah, basically getting terminated.
Well, if France still operated Devil's Island, they could send all the Jews to Devil's Island. Not to, complete the job that you started with Dreyfus, and just send them all to Devil's Island because they're Jewish. Or you could make them sew on a yellow star of David on their clothes, so they would walk around, Gay Paris. We can know who these Jews are and identify them for what they are. Now, this is the tradition of Europe, to hate Jews and to be despicably, it's in effect racism. I know being Jewish isn't a race technically, but of course, your race thinkers, which is so common in Europe, was so common in Europe, helped give rise to Nazism. It's still alive and well. And Mr. Macron is obviously, thinly, you could call it domestic politics in France, but he is catering to the most anti-Semitic attitudes in Europe, which I'm sad to say are still alive and kicking.
Yeah, and Bonnie in the chat is asking, is the visas that are getting terminated, right? Oh yeah, because I think I said they are getting terminated. Yeah, I meant I
Well, we're
meant the
only a few
visas.
steps away. We can open up
Yeah.
I don't want to laugh about it, but they may as well open up a concentration camp in France or something. For the Jews' own protection, we'll put them into these, work facilities. It's probably better for everyone in his imagination. Yeah. Is their visas getting terminated though? Yeah.
Uh, I didn't even mean visas getting terminated. Technically, their employment getting terminated, because as I understand, their visas are not getting canceled, but they eventually run out and are simply not renewed. So
the job was the condition for the visa. You lose the job, you lose the visa.
well, not even that. It's they still have their job, but they want to get their visas renewed after a certain period because they have to. And the French state, the French embassy, is not allowing that. It's pretty much not giving them a sort of an option to get their visas renewed. With many of them either staying illegally or asking the Israeli embassy in France to basically get a special permission to stay.
Yeah, it can work both ways. You lose your visa, you lose your job, you lose your job, you lose your visa. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? We do, because surely we don't want to punish Israel for defending itself after the atrocities of October 7th. Israel is, desperately fighting for its existence, and Mr. Macron is helping the enemy in as many ways as possible, and demonizing Israelis in the process. I think there's little doubt about that. We've discussed on the program already how recognizing a Palestinian state at this point, which is, of course, his plan, would be, rewarding them outright for October 7th, encouraging more October 7ths. He talks out of one side as well, we can't have permanent war. Well, permanent war is exactly what this appeasement has caused. And he's calling for more appeasement that would make the war permanent forever. So it's Israel that has to stop, even though Israel is the one acting in perfectly reasonable self-defense here. It boils down to something that simple and straightforward, frankly. And Macron and other Western leaders talking about recognizing a Palestinian state and denouncing Israel in all the various forms that they have, isolating Israel, de-investing in Israel. How is that justified? How is that morally justified when Israel is acting in perfectly reasonable self-defense? In my view, Israel could be taking much harsher steps. France, for example, well, you don't know, given France's history with the Nazis and stuff, I'm not sure what they would do in response. But if France were attacked by a neighbor, I'm sure France would want all out support for its efforts. And anyone saying, well, the country that's attacking France, we've got you, France, you've got to feed them. France, you can't attack their civilians. Shackle France in its defense against an attack by a neighbor. No, it only applies to Israel. Israel is somehow a unique case. They do not have a right to defend themselves. An occupation of Gaza City absolutely makes sense. Israel controls at this point a good deal of it. But if they're going to root out Hamas, it's like rooting out the Nazis. Well, again, like I'm not sure how many French people really wanted the Nazis rooted out of France. At least there was a brave French resistance during World War II that wanted to root out the Nazis out of France. But France has got a despicable history of anti-Semitism, and this is just the latest chapter of it.
Yeah, and we have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. A super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Bull Moose. Thank you so much. He says, is he not aware of his timing, considering that their office in Paris was attacked less than a week ago? He might as well just admit that he supports mafia-style intimidation and terror to boot. So he's referring to an El El Al office in Paris has been attacked, has been basically spray painted. El Al genocide airline was sprayed over it. So again, just for clarification, when we are talking about this sort of visas not getting renewed, apparently this was a process that has been taking for the last few months. This is not something that just happened now, that basically all of them at once were either kicked out or terminated or anything like that. It's basically this seems to be a silent basically action against Israelis to not renew their visas. So this doesn't seem as a sort of like one thing that happened, but at some point it was decided that the Israelis are not getting their visas renewed, and now we are basically seeing a lot of them speak out about it.
Yeah, it's a tacit support for the genocidal monsters of Hamas. I mean, you may as well lay out the red carpet for Hamas leadership, uh, France. I mean, you're taking a pro-Hamas stance, you're taking a pro-terrorist stance, even if it's only tacitly. And it's this tacit, sort of, no, we're not going to ban all Jews from Israel all at once. But my God, if when Trump puts a immigration restriction from certain Muslim countries, boy, that's absolute racism, that's Islamophobia, etc. And we can talk about that. I mean, might be a dubious thing, it might be a helpful thing or not. But compare that to France, would in effect taking a tacit, silent approach to, in effect, the purging, the purifying of the French blood from any Jewish blood, because we don't want any corruption of France. That's in effect the policy. If it were the roles were switched, of course, they'd have no problem saying Mr. Trump was absolutely a racist and Islamophobe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's sort of a silent sanction of the worst and ugliest kind of anti-Semitism.
We have a super chat from Paul. Thank you so much. Yeah, and to sort of maybe preempt some of the criticism if somebody said, well, France has a right to, control their borders or decide who to give their visas or anything in that regard. The answer is no. No nation has a right to sort of oppress, definitely not oppress their own people, and even, which again, this is even oppression of their own people, right? It's an oppression of the right to association. Somebody in France, some company in France, somebody renting out an apartment in France, somebody selling groceries in France wants to associate with an Israeli that is coming in to visit, that is coming in to work, and the French state is saying, no, these are the kind of people, wink, wink, we do not want here. So we will not get their visas, which again is simply a sort of this action that state has taken into basically allowing who it can associate. Again, we are not talking about, maybe some control at the border, making sure they are not terrorists, making sure they don't carry some diseases or anything in that regard. No, we are talking about people who are already here, who are already in France, and simply for some reason they are not allowed to stay here anymore legally.
Yeah, and talk about a double standard with Muslim immigrants. I mean, my God, if France were to do this with their Muslim immigrants, think of the hue and cry that would go up. Think of the hue and cry. If they treated Muslim immigrants the same way, think, is there any doubt for 5 minutes what the position would be? Look, we've been offering, and the West has offered how many times to Palestinians a state? They don't want it. Or when they effectively get it, as when we're now at the 20-year anniversary of Israel's unilateral pullout of Gaza. We've been living in effect with the two-state solution. And you can dangle out the prospect of more rewards and more rewards, whether it was the Oslo Accords before that. We just go through decades of my life where Palestinians have been offered peace with Israel and have rejected it. The genocidal intentions, the explicit genocidal intentions, clearly come from the jihadist side, the terrorist side, Hamas. There's no question, and Hezbollah, and all the other flavors of jihadist hatred of Israel. They're the ones who explicitly want genocide. They're the ones who target Israeli civilians. They're the ones who engage in needless atrocities. They are the ones who still have hostages, mind you. So Macron, when the hostages are still there, dangling out this reward for them, is absolutely encouraging more of that by mislabeling the situation, by calling Israel genocidal, when Israel could have totally depopulated Gaza many, many months ago using only conventional weapons, when in fact they're, in my view, suicidally and bizarrely feeding the population and acquiescing to demands from the world that they feed the enemy population. There is a total moral inversion here. They're accusing Israel, who's sending pallets of food and water over there, trying to figure out how to get supplies there, of genocide, as if, and this is the sort of mushy-headed, misbegotten attitudes of Western leaders since 9/11 and before. Gosh, if only we can reach out to the hearts and minds of the people on the Muslim street, we would win them over with our kindness, our benevolence, our altruism. They would suddenly realize that, that having a liberal Republican form of government and free speech and treating women decently and not throwing gays off rooftops and hanging them by chains is the way to go. No, we're talking about misdiagnosing the situation. The ideology that is entrenched in the Muslim world, in particular in the group that we call Palestinians, is so irrational, based in mysticism, a kind of collectivist hatred, which can only be compared to, say, racism. The problem is not solved by giving them rewards. They're the ones engaged in civilian attacks, civilian atrocities. They're the ones whose explicit goal is genocide. And if all of that evidence does not click into anything in your head, Macron, if you will end up doing exactly what you're doing, encouraging that terrorism, taking the pro-terrorist approach. And when anyone who can see the actual facts for what they are, calmly look at them, as opposed to taking a rankly political position, which some of these political cowards do, or just an overtly anti-Israel line, which they've always had, being, I think, at heart anti-Semites. You know, facts won't matter to them. The comparative civilization, say, of Israel and the nations that surround them, that won't matter to them. They're going to look at this through a collectivist mystic lens, the collectivist mystic lens of the jihadists. And unfortunately, that's exactly the way Macron looks at the world. And his formula is the same formula that has caused us ongoing, never ending, ceaseless war, um, rather than an effort to actually win any kind of war against the jihadists. The only thing that will bring an end to this war. Macron is perpetuating it. And while he's saying at the same time, only peace, only throwing them more rewards can possibly bring peace to the area. No, that is a total misdiagnosis of the situation. And I think it can only be explained by European anti-Semitism. Here in the West, ladies and gentlemen, my country, America, I didn't realize the depths of anti-Semitic hatred that still exist, and they do. And I really have no other way of explaining this other than that. Sure, they look at it through their neo-Marxist, postmodern lens. You know, Israel is a colonial state. It's fraught with all kinds of problems just from their own analysis, but that's all just rationalization. It really is. It's the hatred of civilization that characterizes so much of the intellectual atmosphere of our time, of course, would come out in this rash of hating Israel, the comparatively civilized nation there. But Israel is somehow a special case in so many different ways. And what can possibly explain that but some kind of rank anti-Semitism, which is put into this toxic mix?
Yeah, and now let's actually switch over to sort of the open hatred of Israel. Let's go to some of Macron's recent statement when it comes to the Gaza plan, which again, I think I still don't know exactly what it's going to be. But one thing we definitely know is Israel is going into Gaza City. And what I understand it to mean is actually going in without evacuating everybody from out of there. Now, I might be wrong about that, but basically, what has happened until now is anytime Israel went somewhere, they moved all the civilians out. So Israel was never controlling large parts of Palestinian population during this war. Going fully in means every single Palestinian in Gaza will be under direct Israeli control. Now, Macron has said on this a disaster waiting to happen. Um, he urges for the UN to launch a stabilization mission and pushes for permanent ceasefire to end the war. So again, the Jewish state is trying to fight for itself. The Jewish state is trying to defend itself. We need to send the UN to actually, stop them from doing so. UN has been we don't even have to go far to say how much UN has failed in the region. The UN peacekeeping forces were in Egypt when and when Egypt wanted to screw around, fuck around with Israel, they just went to the peacekeeping forces and say, "Hey guys, can you get out? Because we actually want to move our armies there," and they got out. When it came to UNIFIL in the south of Lebanon, they were supposed to get Hezbollah forces out. You could see the tunnels from the places where the UNIFIL forces were. I know, maybe they took a different routes to work, but there is no way after 20 years you don't notice Hezbollah is still in the south and you haven't done a single thing about it. So trying to say what needs to happen here is UN forces come into Gaza or whatever is ridiculous.
The UN has
Yeah.
been a pocket of Palestinian terrorists for many, many years. They've been teaching, genocidal hatred of Jewish people. The United Nations, through UNRWA, has been teaching young Palestinians genocidal, murderous hatred of Jews. The UN has done nothing to give the world peace. The UN is nothing but a terrorist and dictatorship protection racket, as I say. But let's focus on what Monsieur Macron is saying here. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Well, I'll tell you what, the situation before October 7th was a disaster waiting to happen, and we had that disaster, October 7th. In fact, there have been many, many such terrorist disasters at the hands of jihadists. We can go back to 9/11, 2001. No, that was a disaster. That context was a disaster waiting to happen. No, so whatever the appeasing diplomacy was before October 7th was the disaster waiting to happen. It culminated in a disaster. It culminated in a disaster. Whatever our policy was before 9/11 in the United States, appeasing jihadists, that was the disaster waiting to happen. And now Macron is actually suggesting us another scenario like that. As I say, you make a really great point. The UN said, don't be in southern Lebanon, don't go south of that river. We let them for years operate south of that river, despite what they call international law. That was a disaster waiting to happen. He's got it completely upside down, inside out, and backwards. He is insisting on going back to the policy that has resulted in disaster after disaster after disaster. Jihadist violence, Muslim terrorism, again and again and again and again. And it will never end so long as people like Macron insist on following the same policy. That, a policy of appeasement, was a disaster waiting to happen, and we have suffered the actual disasters. So a disaster does not explain itself. Something like 9/11 in New York, what is it now, 24 years ago? And as of next month, 24 years, right? And what happened 2 years ago, October 7th, almost now, October 7th, it'll be the second anniversary. Those were disasters. Those happened. Those were the results of the appeasing policy that Macron is now insisting on. No, it is your policy, sir, that is a disaster, a whole new set of disasters waiting to happen. You've got to throw out the playbook that caused October 7th. You got to throw out the playbook that caused September 11th. You don't return to that same old Oslo Accord appeasement type approach, because that is precisely the condition that was a disaster. In fact, multiple disasters with thousands of innocent lives waiting to be slaughtered. So that policy of appeasement is a disaster waiting to happen. We've seen and suffered the disasters. And even after living through those disasters, which were just waiting to happen because of Western appeasement, he insists on going back to appeasement as if trying to find a real solution to it. The rooting out of Hamas, that would be the disaster. No, they can't hate Israel anymore. Nothing Israel does will enrage them more to the point where to a higher state of genocidal hatred, suicidal rage on the part of jihadists. We're already at the level of, DEFCON, whatever. We're already at such a level of hatred, genocidal hatred of Israel, and generally of Western civilization, that you can't. There's no if Israel's irritating the population. The local population in the region is not the problem. They could not irritate them anymore because they irritate them by their very existence. They irritate them to the point of genocidal, murderous hatred. No, that's what needs to be addressed, Monsieur Macron. That's what needs to be addressed, is that genocidal hatred that is built into that culture. It's that culture that needs to be addressed. What you're doing is telling us, insisting on returning to this policy of appeasement that resulted in disaster after disaster after disaster, and saying anything else is a disaster waiting to happen. No, that policy has resulted in multiple murderous disasters, sir. You've got it exactly backwards.
Yeah, and something else I wanted to bring up, and now I'm completely forgot about it. So let's read a bit more. Sorry, I got so distracted. Uh,
You're so
but
overwhelmed
yeah,
with my brilliance, my
yeah.
analysis.
Wow. Okay. I mean, again, when it comes to sort of, uh, I'm trying to remember it. Okay, never mind. We'll just read the next thing and let's see if I catch on. So Netanyahu has responded to this. Israel has no choice but to finish the job and complete the defeat of Hamas. We have about 70 to 75% of Gaza under Israeli control, military control, but we have two remaining strongholds. These are Gaza City and the central camps in Al Mawasi. And yeah, absolutely. Again, this is not something you can choose to do. This is not something that, well, maybe. Israel gets control in Gaza, or maybe Israel doesn't get control in Gaza. People were killed on October 7. People were taken in hostages on October 7. And their rights are threatened. The rights of Israeli citizens are threatened by the existence of Hamas and by the existence of Palestinians as they are right now. In the same way as the Nazis, and I mean every single German and every single Japanese person, uh, besides those in America, the ones actually living in Japanese empire and supporting the regime. And well, if there were some in America that were also supporting the regime in Japan, then also, but there, I think there was something wrong done during that time when it comes to Japanese citizens of America, Japanese Americans. But the main point being that them and their culture is also a threat. The fact that they support such a government, the fact that they do want to wage a war against a free state is a threat to Israel, is a threat to every single Israeli. Something needs to happen, and we cannot wait. Israel cannot just go back and act as if nothing happened without anything changing and without fundamentally changing the situation. Again, Palestinians still support Hamas. Palestinians still support armed resistance against Israel, against the state of Israel, and against any Jews in the region and I think around the world.
Well, what America did with Japanese Americans during World War II was inexcusably bad. If you'd fled the Empire of Japan and to come to America, that would tell you right. That should indicate one thing: they don't really like the place they're living. They want to move up, but yet we put them into detention centers like Manzanar in California, rounded up perfectly patriotic, innocent Japanese people. That is wrong. No question about it. But you know something? Leonard Peikoff, in a great talk we just covered in our ARCUK seminar, America versus Americans, he was reviewing American policy in the wake of September 11th. He points out that there are always moderates. There are always, in any enemy population, were there non-Nazi Germans? Absolutely. Were there Japanese people who opposed the divine emperor and his quest to control the Pacific? Of course there were. Of course there were. But they don't matter. And they become tools of the state. They become tools of the operation, the war machine. Insofar as they're just going about their normal business, they are perhaps innocent tools of the war machine. Now, mind you, I see more of that during World War II, anti-Nazi Germans, than I have evidence for anti-terrorist Muslims in the region. Honestly, I do. But the mere fact that there are moderate Muslims who oppose all this is irrelevant. It really is. So long as the violent ones, the jihadist ones, the consistent, from their position, consistent ones are in charge and acting on your behalf. If the government you elect in Gaza is Hamas, and they almost immediately start throwing rockets at Israel from the time they take power, and there's no real opposition, there's no underground trying to assassinate Hitler, say, there's no equivalent of the French underground, nothing like that. From what I can tell. Okay, but let's grant the premise that there are moderate Palestinians who want to live at peace with Israel. They really don't matter, and they are being used, and in this case also a particularly egregious way. Women and children, innocent civilians, are being used as human shields and are acquiescing in effect to being used as human shields. They want the casualty numbers for their own civilians so they can use it as PR against Israel. That's why they don't wear uniforms. That's why they hide in hospitals. That's why they hide the hostages in residential areas. These tunnels were all over the place, okay? They use their own people and their own population, in effect, as human shields against any self-defensive action. And so the moderates not only don't matter, they're being used as tools for aggression in this case. So in any normal war context, you wouldn't say, okay, we still have to bomb Tokyo, even if there are innocent Japanese people who don't like their rulers. We still have to bomb Germany, even if there are innocent Germans. And that is correct. The fault is the aggressor, Germany, Japan. In this case, Hamas is the aggressor. Any Israeli inflicted deaths in this war are the responsibility of Hamas. It is particularly egregiously true when that population is being used as a war tactic, as simply a war tactic. And the greater the casualties of civilians, the happier Hamas is. So long as they know that we will pull our punches because we don't want to hurt so-called innocent Palestinians, uh, they in effect. I mean, as I said in our discussion of Leonard Peikoff's brilliant talk, America versus Americans, George W. Bush and other Western leaders kind of laid out the roadmap for these terrorists. You can hold your own civilians hostage, and we will submit to any demand you might make.
We have a super chat from Faye. Thank you so much. And with that, we are out of time. So, James, where can people find you?
Here at Ayn Rand Center UK, like I say, I was just referring to some of the material that's available if you're a paid subscriber to Ayn Rand Center UK. We have great discussions on everything that Leonard Peikoff, and before that, everything that Ayn Rand ever wrote in nonfiction. And we even on Tuesdays have the Fountainhead, that lasted a while, now the Atlas Shrugged book club. So if you're interested in the works of Ayn Rand, which is informing the viewpoint you'll hear on this channel, please become a paid subscriber to Ayn Rand Center UK.
And we will continue this on the reality show where we'll talk about the United Nations relentless fight against Israel, putting the link in the chat. So make sure to join us there in just a few minutes or so. Thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Be safe.